The air inside the cavern bites at your lungs with the sharpness of a shattered flint blade. You open your eyes to a darkness that feels heavier than the mammoth hides draped across you. A dying ember glows faintly in the center of the stone floor like a single bloody eye. The frost creeping along the jagged cavern walls acts like a silent predator, closing in for the kill. Outside the stone threshold, the world exists in a permanent state of brutal and unforgiving deep freeze. You can hear the wind howling down the mountain pass with the fury of a starving wolf. Every breath you take forms a thick, white cloud that vanishes instantly into the freezing black air. Your joints ache with a deep, primal stiffness as you force your body to sit up slowly. The cold here is not merely a weather condition, but a living adversary seeking to end you. It reaches through the thick layers of wolf fur to steal the vital warmth from your blood. You understand immediately that staying motionless in this freezing, dark space will guarantee your swift physical death. Survival requires deliberate and calculated action against an enemy that possesses infinite patience and infinite crushing power. You reach a trembling hand toward the faint orange ember resting in the bed of gray ash. Dry moss crumbles between your thick, calloused fingers as you feed the meager spark with delicate care. A tiny flame erupts from the tinder and casts dancing shadows across the curved walls of stone. The brief flash of heat offers a fragile psychological victory against the overwhelming dominance of the ice. You examine your hands in the flickering light and notice the blackened tips of your left fingers. Frostbite has already claimed a portion of your flesh during the harsh struggles of the previous day. You wrap the damaged fingers tightly with strips of soft rabbit hide to prevent further flesh decay. The pain serves as a sharp tactical reminder that errors in this environment carry a fatal price. You stand up and stretch your legs to force the sluggish blood through your freezing muscular system. Your stomach twists with a violent cramp that signals the critical depletion of your internal energy reserves. Hunger joins the extreme cold to form a dual threat against your continued existence in this wasteland. You must secure calories today or your core temperature will plummet beyond the point of possible recovery. You approach the small pile of resources gathered near the back wall of your shallow stone sanctuary. 3 sturdy wooden spears lean against the rock beside a smooth hunting club carved from dense bone. You select the heaviest spear because the thick ash wood resists shattering in the extremely low temperatures. The flint tip remains razor sharp and secured tightly to the shaft with dried strips of sinew. You check the bindings on your heavy fur boots and pull the leather straps until they bite. Snow must not penetrate the seals around your ankles during the long trek across the frozen valley. You drape a massive bear hide over your shoulders and secure it across your chest with bone toggles. The heavy pelt smells strongly of dried animal fat and wood smoke from countless previous winter fires. You pull a thick hood of fox fur over your head to shield your ears from the wind. Only your eyes remain exposed to the hostile environment waiting just beyond the safety of the cave. You grip the wooden spear shaft tightly and move toward the jagged opening of your stone shelter. The transition from the dim cave to the blinding white exterior requires intense mental and physical preparation. You pause at the threshold to study the hostile terrain spreading out beneath the pale morning sun. A vast ocean of crystalline snow stretches toward a horizon dominated by towering peaks of black rock. You step forward and plunge your heavy boots into the powdery snow piled near the cave entrance. The temperature outside strikes your exposed face with the physical force of a swung wooden club. The air here sits at 70 degrees below zero and threatens to freeze your lungs upon entry. You breathe through a narrow slit in your fur collar to warm the oxygen before it descends. Your eyelashes accumulate microscopic beads of ice within the first 10 seconds of exposure to the air. You squint against the brilliant glare reflecting off the endless fields of undisturbed snow surrounding the mountain. The silence of the valley feels heavy and oppressive beneath the cloudless expanse of the pale sky. You scan the desolate landscape for any disruption in the smooth white surface that might indicate prey. A hunter in this frozen era operates as a silent ghost, navigating an ocean of lethal ice. You move with deliberate slowness to conserve your precious bodily heat and avoid triggering premature muscular fatigue. Every step requires you to lift your knee high and press your foot down through the crust. The snow emits a sharp squeaking sound under your weight due to the extreme atmospheric cold. You listen carefully to the ambient noise because sound travels vast distances across the frozen, empty plains. The wind sweeps across the flat expanses and carries the bitter scent of distant frozen pine forests. You tighten your grip on the wooden spear and adjust the heavy bear pelt sitting on your shoulders. Your survival strategy depends entirely on maintaining a steady core temperature while navigating the treacherous, icy terrain. You map out a route that keeps you close to the massive stone outcroppings for temporary shelter. The journey across the open valley exposes you directly to the lethal currents of the northern wind. You plunge forward into the deep drifts and force your massive legs to break the hard crust. The physical exertion generates a small pocket of internal heat beneath your thick layers of animal hides. You must balance this exertion perfectly to avoid sweating in the lethal sub-zero temperatures of the valley. Sweat turns quickly into a sheet of solid ice that conducts the cold directly to your skin. You moderate your pace and focus on smooth, rhythmic movements to conserve your rapidly dwindling energy stores. The landscape offers no visual comfort as you stare across miles of identical, blinding white snow dunes. You notice a slight depression in the snowbank, near a cluster of dead and shattered birch trees. You approach the anomaly slowly and kneel down to inspect the disturbed surface of the frozen powder. A set of deep, hooved tracks punches violently into the pristine surface of a fresh snowdrift. The edges of the tracks appear crisp and fragile, indicating the animal passed this location very recently. A single drop of frozen crimson blood rests beside the hoofprint like a bright red ruby. You examine the frozen fluid and deduce that the beast moves with a significant injury to its flank. A wounded target behaves erratically but possesses far less stamina to flee from a persistent human pursuer. You follow the bloody trail across the ridge while keeping your profile low against the howling wind. The wind attempts to push you backward and strip away the fragile layer of heat surrounding your skin. You lean your weight into the gale and force your legs to pump with relentless forward momentum. A sudden shift in the wind direction brings a faint and familiar scent to your cold nose. You drop instantly into a deep crouch and let the white furs camouflage your body against the snow. The musky odor of a wounded animal drifts softly through the freezing currents of the morning air. Your tactical brain begins calculating the vector and distance of the potential target moving through the valley. You grip the spear shaft with renewed strength as adrenaline floods your veins and warms your blood. The prospect of fresh meat overrides the searing pain radiating from your partially frozen toes and fingers. You advance toward a cluster of snow-covered boulders that offer adequate visual cover for your creeping approach. The terrain grows steeper and forces you to use your free hand to maintain balance on the ice. A massive shadow moves behind a distant thicket of dead pine trees jutting from the white earth. You freeze your entire body in place and allow your breathing to become slow and perfectly silent. An enormous elk steps out from the dead branches and struggles to drag its massive right hind leg. The creature stands taller than two men and carries a vast crown of heavy bone on its head. Its thick brown coat looks ragged and heavily matted, with frozen chunks of dark blood and snow. You understand that approaching this massive horned beast requires perfect timing and flawless execution of your strike. A frontal assault would allow the elk to gore you effortlessly with its wide and deadly antlers. You must maneuver into a blind spot and deliver a single devastating thrust to the vital organs. You sink deeper into the snow and begin a grueling lateral crawl toward the flank of the beast. The snow packs tightly against your chest and draws the warmth steadily away from your vital core. You ignore the burning sensation in your chest and focus entirely on the movements of the target. The elk lowers its massive head to scrape at the ice in a desperate search for buried moss. You slide forward over the frozen crust with the smooth and silent grace of a hunting cat. The distance between you and the prey narrows from 50 paces down to a mere 20 paces. You can hear the heavy, raspy breathing of the exhausted animal echoing loudly in the still air. You carefully place your boots into the deep holes left by the elk to mask your footsteps. The wind shifts suddenly and blows directly from your position toward the sensitive nostrils of the beast. The elk snaps its head upward and flares its nostrils to process the sudden scent of a predator. You abandon stealth instantly and explode upward from the snowbank, with your heavy wooden spear raised high. Surprise provides a momentary tactical advantage as the beast struggles to pivot its enormous injured bulk around. You close the remaining distance in 3 massive bounding strides across the treacherous and slippery ice field. The elk rears back on its hind legs and thrashes its heavy antlers through the freezing air. You dive beneath the swinging bone weapons and slide forward on your knees across the packed snow. You drive the sharp flint spearhead violently upward into the exposed soft tissue behind the front leg. The impact jars your shoulders and sends a violent shockwave traveling straight down the wooden weapon shaft. The stone blade pierces the thick hide and sinks deeply into the beating heart of the creature. A sudden spray of hot red blood erupts from the wound and steams violently in the freezing air. The massive animal lets out a deafening bellow that shatters the absolute silence of the frozen valley. You release the spear shaft immediately and roll sideways to avoid the collapsing weight of the beast. The elk crashes heavily into the snowbank and sends a thick cloud of white powder exploding upward. You scramble to your feet and draw the short bone knife strapped tightly to your thick fur belt. The animal kicks its legs weakly for several seconds before its massive body finally goes completely still. You stand over the fallen creature and watch the last breath escape its nostrils as a white cloud. A profound sense of victory floods your mind, but the tactical situation demands immediate and rapid action. The extreme cold will freeze this massive carcass into a solid block of impenetrable ice within minutes. You kneel beside the steaming body and plunge your bare hands directly into the hot, pooling blood. The intense heat of the fresh kill restores the feeling to your numb fingers almost instantly. You work quickly to slice through the tough muscle and extract the most valuable organs for consumption. The liver and the heart provide dense energy required to survive the bitter darkness of the coming night. You cut thick strips of meat from the flanks and pack them tightly into a leather shoulder pouch. A dark shadow falls across the valley as a thick blanket of gray clouds swallows the pale sun. The ambient temperature drops noticeably and the wind begins to scream with a renewed and terrifying violence. A sudden barrage of sharp ice crystals strikes your exposed face like a swarm of angry hornets. You look toward the northern mountain pass and see a massive white wall of turbulent snow advancing rapidly. A deadly blizzard sweeps down from the peaks and promises to obliterate everything trapped out in the open. You abandon the rest of the heavy carcass and hoist the packed leather meat pouch over your shoulder. Survival now depends entirely on your ability to navigate back to the cave before the whiteout blinds you. You turn your back to the wind and begin the arduous march toward the distant rocky ridge. The storm swallows the landscape completely and reduces your visual range to less than a dozen paces. You rely purely on your internalized spatial mapping of the valley to guide your steps through the void. The wind pushes you violently sideways and forces you to constantly correct your trajectory across the uneven ice. Your heavy fur garments become coated in a thick layer of frost that restricts your physical mobility. You feel a deep and seductive lethargy creeping slowly into the core of your freezing human brain. The cold whispers deceptive promises of warmth and peace if you simply lie down in the soft snow. You recognize this psychological attack as the final symptom of severe hypothermia, shutting down your biological systems. You bite down hard on your own tongue to flood your fading mind with sharp and waking pain. The metallic taste of fresh blood fills your mouth and forces your heavy eyelids to snap fully open. You roar into the howling wind to assert your dominance over the hostile forces attempting to crush you. Your heavy boots strike a patch of solid black rock jutting out from beneath the deep snowdrifts. You recognize the slanted stone formation as a marker located roughly 100 paces from your cave entrance. A renewed surge of adrenaline fuels your burning legs as you sprint the final distance through the storm. The dark, jagged maw of your stone sanctuary suddenly materializes from the swirling chaos of the whiteout. You dive violently through the narrow entrance and collapse onto the dry dirt floor of the dark cave. The immediate absence of the screaming wind feels like a heavy physical weight lifting from your crushed shoulders. You crawl desperately toward the center of the cavern, where the small fire continues to smolder faintly. Your trembling hands stack dry twigs and clumps of brown moss directly over the glowing orange coals. You blow softly into the ash and watch the fragile flames eagerly consume the fresh, dry fuel. The fire quickly grows into a roaring blaze that pushes the freezing shadows back toward the cave walls. You strip away the stiff, frozen outer furs and sit as close to the dancing flames as possible. The intense, radiant heat strikes your numb skin and causes a wave of sharp, agonizing pain to follow. Nerve-endings scream in protest as the warm blood finally forces its way back into your frozen extremities. You welcome the intense suffering because the burning sensation proves that your flesh remains alive and functional. You open the leather pouch and retrieve a thick slab of raw purple meat harvested from the elk. You impale the dense flesh on a sharpened stick and hold it directly over the hot orange flames. The smell of searing fat fills the small cavern and causes your empty stomach to twist with anticipation. You tear into the warm meat and feel the vital life energy flowing directly into your depleted core. The rich calories refuel your internal furnace and stabilize your dangerously low and erratic body core temperature. You sit silently by the fire and listen to the relentless storm raging outside the thick stone walls. The world beyond this fragile ring of light remains a hostile void locked in a permanent deep freeze. Survival in this brutal era requires absolute physical resilience and a mind calibrated for constant tactical warfare. You understand that nature possesses no malice but operates with a cold and mechanical indifference to human life. The Ice Age crushes the weak without hesitation and rewards only those who fight with relentless savage ingenuity. You examine your scarred hands and recognize them as the ultimate tools of defiance against the frozen apocalypse. Tomorrow the fire will burn low again, and the hunger will return to claw at your empty belly. The endless cycle of hunting and freezing will continue until the sun finally returns to warm the earth. You toss another thick branch onto the fire and watch the bright sparks float upward into the dark. You close your eyes and prepare your mind for the savage battles that await you at dawn. Your heart beats steadily in the warmth of the cave as a testament to your ultimate enduring victory.